Let's get right into it. Number 1. The Monster Studying 1939. A psychologist named Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa decided to tackle the question of what causes stuttering. His hypothesis was that it was a learned behavior caused by anxiety about speaking. To test this, he and his graduate student, Mary Tudor, conducted an experiment on 22 orphan children. They split the children into two groups. The first group, which included some children who already had a stutter, was given constant positive reinforcement. They were told their speech was fine, that they were great speakers, and not to worry about any mistakes. The second group, composed of children with perfectly normal speech, was subjected to the opposite. They were relentlessly criticized, belittled, and told they were developing a stutter. The results were as predictable as they were horrifying. The children in the second group, who had spoken perfectly fine before the experiment, became anxious, withdrawn, and developed significant speech problems. They refused to speak, covered their mouths in shame, and showed all the signs of the very condition the researchers were supposedly trying to understand. The experiment didn't induce a true stutter, but it did inflict deep psychological trauma and lifelong social anxiety on a group of vulnerable children. The study was so unethical, so monstrous in its design, that it was hidden away for decades. It became known as the Monster Study, not because it was about monsters, but because it was created by them. Number 2. The two-headed dog. The mid-20th century was a wild time for science. A sort of hold my beer and watch this era of medical experimentation. And nowhere was that more apparent than in the lab of Soviet scientist Vladimir Demikov. Demikov was a pioneer in transplantology, but his methods were the stuff of nightmares. His most infamous experiment, creating a two-headed dog. In 1954, he surgically grafted the head, shoulders, and front legs of a puppy onto the neck of a larger adult German Shepherd. The puppy's head could see, hear, and even drink milk, though the milk would just dribble out of a disconnected esophagus. The host dog, meanwhile, was stuck with a parasitic second head. Demikov performed this grotesque surgery over 20 times. The two-headed dogs never lived for long. Due to tissue rejection and other complications, the longest any of them survived was about a month. Most died within days. Demikov wasn't just doing this for shock value. He was trying to solve the complex problems of organ transplantation and immune response. His work, as gruesome as it was, did lay some of the groundwork for human heart and lung transplants. But it's a chilling reminder that scientific progress is often built on a foundation of truly disturbing and ethically questionable experiments. He successfully created a living, breathing monument to surgical horror, proving that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Number 3. The Pit of Deciberon, the world of psychology. There's a name that often comes up when you talk about questionable ethics: Harry Harlow. In the 1950s, Harlow wanted to study the nature of love and attachment, specifically between a mother and child. To do this, he used baby rhesus monkeys. He separated them from their real mothers just hours after birth and raised them in isolation with two surrogate mothers. One was made of cold, hard wire, but had a bottle of milk. The other was covered in soft, cuddly cloth, but offered no food. The baby monkeys overwhelmingly preferred the cloth mother, clinging to it for comfort and only going to the wire mother when they were desperate for food. This demonstrated that attachment wasn't just about sustenance, it was about comfort and security. A heartwarming conclusion, right? Well, Harlow was just getting started. He then decided to see what would happen if he took that need for comfort and completely destroyed it. He created what he cheerfully called the Pit of Despair, a vertical chamber where he would isolate the monkeys for up to a year. It was a small, dark steel cage with no light, no sound, and no contact. The monkeys that emerged from this chamber were psychologically shattered. They were incapable of socializing, stared blankly into space, and many refused to eat, starving themselves to death. He essentially engineered clinical depression in these animals. Harlow's work gave us profound insights into the importance of love and affection, but it came at the cost of systematically and creatively torturing intelligent animals to the point of insanity. He built a literal torture chamber to prove that monkeys need their moms. Number 4. The shockboxy. Imagine you've signed up for a psychology experiment about memory. You're in a room with a researcher in a lab coat and another participant. The researcher explains that one of you will be the teacher and the other will be the learner. The learner is strapped into a chair with electrodes on their wrists, and your job as the teacher is to read them word pairs. Every time the learner gets one wrong, you have to deliver an electric shock, increasing the voltage with each mistake. The shock generator in front of you has switches ranging from 15 volts, labeled slight shock, all the way up to 450 volts. Labeled 30, as the experiment goes on, the learner starts to scream in pain, begs you to stop, and eventually falls silent, as if they've passed out or worse. The researcher calmly tells you to continue, that you must complete the experiment. What would you do? This was the setup for Stanley Milgram's infamous obedience experiment in 1961. The good news is, the learner was an actor, and the shocks were fake. The bad news is what the experiment revealed about human nature. Milgram was trying to understand how people could commit atrocities like those seen in the Holocaust. He wanted to know if people were just following orders. The results were chilling. A staggering 65% of the participants, ordinary people just like you, went all the way to the maximum 450-volt shock, even when they believed they were inflicting excruciating pain on a stranger. They were deeply distressed, sweating, and pleading with the researcher, but they kept flipping the switches. The experiment proved that, under the right circumstances, the pressure to obey authority can make good people do terrible things. You weren't the one being shocked, but the experiment. It was really on you the whole time. Number 5. The Stanford Prison Experiment If you give a good person a little bit of power, what happens? That's the question psychologist Philip Zimbardo wanted to answer in 1971, so he set up a fake prison in the basement of the Stanford University Psychology building and recruited a bunch of college students to be either prisoners or guards for a 2-week study. The participants were all screened and found to be psychologically stable, healthy, normal young men. The prisoners were arrested by real police, booked, and brought to the mock prison. The guards were given uniforms, billy clubs, and mirrored sunglasses to prevent eye contact. They were told they couldn't use physical violence, but they could create an atmosphere of powerlessness. What happened next was a masterclass in how quickly things can fall apart. Within 24 hours, the guards became sadistic and authoritarian. They subjected the prisoners to psychological torture, forcing them to do push-ups as punishment, stripping them naked, putting bags over their heads. The prisoners, in turn, became passive, helpless, and emotionally broken. Some had full-on mental breakdowns. The whole thing became so abusive and out of control that Zimbardo had to shut it down after only 6 days, partly because his own girlfriend, another psychologist, visited the set and was horrified by what she saw. The experiment famously demonstrated how age-ally people will conform to assigned social roles, but it's also a terrifying look at the darkness that can emerge. When you give someone a uniform and a little bit of authority, it was supposed to be a simulation, but it became very real, very fast. Number 6. The little Albert study babies are basically blank slates, right? They're not born with fears of things like spiders or public speaking. So, where do those fears come from? In 1920, behaviorist John B. Watson wanted to prove that fear was a conditioned response, and he decided the best way to do that was to create a phobia in an unsuspecting infant. His subject was a 9-month-old baby known to history only as Little Albert. Albert was, by all accounts, a calm and happy baby. Watson and his assistant, Rosalie Rayner, first tested his reactions to various objects, including a white rat, a rabbit, a dog, and some cotton wool. Albert was curious and unafraid of all of them. Then, the conditioning began. Every time they presented the white rat to Albert, Watson would stand behind him and smash a steel bar with a hammer, creating a terrifyingly loud noise. Naturally, the noise made Albert cry. After doing this repeatedly, all it took was the sight of the white rat for Albert to burst into tears and try to crawl away. He had learned to fear the rat, but it didn't stop there. His fear generalized to other furry objects. He became terrified of the rabbit, the dog, a fur coat, and even a Santa Claus mask. Watson had successfully installed a phobia in a child's brain. The worst part, they never deconditioned him. Albert's mother moved away before they could reverse the process, so for all we know, He went through life with a deep, inexplicable terror of anything fluffy. It's a landmark study in behaviorism, and also a masterclass in how to be a terrible person. Number 7. The Tuskegee Syphilis Studies. Sometimes the most disturbing experiment is not what is done, but what is not done. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service initiated a study to observe the natural, untreated progression of syphilis. The subjects were 600 impoverished African American men in Tuskegee, Alabama. 399 of them had the disease, while 201 did not, and served as a control group. The men were told they were being treated for bad blood, a vague local term for a variety of ailments. In reality, they were given no effective treatment at all. The researchers' goal was simply to watch them get sicker, go blind, go insane, and eventually die, all so they could document the disease's final brutal stages. The experiment was originally planned to last for 6 months, but it went on for 40 years. The most unforgivable part is that in the 1940s, penicillin became the standard effective cure for syphilis. But the researchers didn't give it to the men. They actively prevented them from getting treatment elsewhere, ensuring their subjects remained sick for the sake of pure data. They were human lab rats, and their health was deliberately sacrificed. The study only ended in 1972 when a whistleblower leaked the story to the press, causing a massive public outcry. The Tuskegee study became a symbol of medical racism and unethical research, a horrifying chapter where the quest for knowledge was used to justify for decades of deception and suffering. It wasn't an experiment. It was a non-consensual death sentence. Number 8. Landis facial expressions. Carney Landis, a psychology graduate student at the University of Minnesota in the 1920s, was fascinated by human emotion. He wanted to know if all people have a common facial expression for specific feelings, like disgust, shock, or joy. So, he designed an experiment to provoke these strong emotions in his subjects, who were mostly his fellow students. He would paint their faces with black lines to better track the movements of their facial muscles, and then expose them to a series of stimuli. At first, it was pretty tame. He made them smell ammonia, listen to jazz music, and look at pictures. But the results were too varied. Landis needed to provoke stronger, more primal reactions, so he escalated things. He made his subjects put their hands into a bucket of live frogs. Then he showed them pornographic images, which was incredibly shocking in the 1920s. But the grand finale was the real horror show. He presented each participant with a live white rat and a knife and ordered them to decapitate it. 2/3 of the participants, ordinary students, complied. For the 1/3 who refused, Landis would just grab the rat and cut its head off himself right in front of them. And what did he discover from all this? Absolutely nothing. His conclusion was that, no, there is no single universal facial expression for any emotion. He traumatized a bunch of students and killed a lot of rats just to prove something that most people could have probably guessed. It was a pointless, gruesome, and ultimately failed experiment in every sense of the word. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.